Welcome to Believers and Nonbelievers, episode number 8. The subject is LGBTQ discrimination and prejudice. I'm Don Fuller, and I'll be moderating this program. The panelists will be on my right, on your left, Kelly Clemenson, who describes himself as a bond servant of Jesus Christ. And on my left, on your right, is Angie Hendricks, who is the director of the pflag Speakers Bureau for Long Beach and Orange County. And on the far left is River Gibbs, who describes himself as an atheist YouTuber and host of the Logically Speaking podcast. So those will be our panelists for today. Before we go any further, I think it's important that we have some definitions of terms because there seems to be some confusion among some people exactly what all the alphabet soup of terminology means. So if we start with LGBT briefly, L stands for lesbian, which refers specifically to females who can be said to have an attraction to other women. G stands for gay, which stands specifically for males who have an attraction to other men, although sometimes some women prefer to describe themselves as gay instead of lesbian, and sometimes the word gay is meant as kind of an umbrella term, such as we might hear the word gay rights, for example. So gay sometimes gets used bigger. B means bisexual, which means people who can be attracted to people of either sex, and it's not necessarily 50-50. It might be somewhere on a sliding scale, somewhere along that line for individual people. T stands for transgender, which means you have people whose anatomical, biological body does not line up with how they identify themselves inside their brain up here. And we're going to not talk a whole lot about transgenders today because that's a kind of a separate subject in itself, but that's what T means, transgenders. Then after that, there's the letter Q, and Q sometimes stands for questioning, but has come to be known for queer. And clearly, the word queer was a highly derogatory term for a long time, and still is in some circles. So it's a term that I describe it as people who describe themselves as queer. And it's sort of however you want to fit yourself into that. There are some other letters that fall into here sometimes as well. You might come across the letter I, which stands for intersex, which is a more modern term for what used to be known as hermaphrodite, which means people who have ambiguous genitalia. So they might be male or female in their head, but biologically or anatomically, they are somewhat ambiguous. And those people have had enormous troubles with the way society treats them over the years. It is my sort of understanding that the transgender population is probably less than 1% of the population of the total, maybe about that, and that the intersex population is somewhere between 1 and 2,000 of the total. So that means, for example, that every day in this country there are probably 10 or 15 or 20 intersex children born somewhere in this country. And there are some other letters after that as well. If you find the letter A, that would stand for ally, which typically means a straight ally. You might see sometimes GF, which stands for gender fluid, or GV, which stands for gender variable. So those are some of those terms that you might find used in all this alphabet soup. I also want to cover a couple of the little things very briefly. There's a term of, and we'll go back to the term of transgender, there's a term of cisgender, CISGENDER, which means that what you are anatomically, biologically matches up with how you see yourself in your head. And most people, the vast majority of us, are cisgender. Even by far most people who describe themselves as gay or lesbian are in fact cisgender. And so transgender is the opposite, where what you are anatomically or biologically doesn't match up with how you see yourself in your head. So those are some of the basic sorts of definitions that fit things. And one last little thing, and then I'll get off of this, but Angie introduced herself was introduced as a director of pflag Speakers Bureau. And pflag, P-F-L-A-G, originally meant parents and families of lesbians and gays. It was started back in the 1970s by a woman who had a gay son. And now it has become an all-inclusive term, so it includes anybody who is parents and families and friends and aunts and uncles of lesbians and gays and people who are bisexual and transgender and their allies and everybody who just feels some connection with that particular community. So it's coming an all-enveloping community right there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the panelists, and they each get a few minutes to describe where they are on this subject of LGBTQ discrimination and acceptance. And we'll start with Kelly. Lucky you.
I get to go first. Okay. Well, thanks, Don. As Don had described, I'm a Christian, and that's where my evaluation of topics comes from. I like to stay away from politics. That's when Phil first mentioned this to me about coming out and being on the panel. I was reluctant because I was afraid I was going to get into politics, because I don't think politics actually solves anything, just delays the inevitable. But when Phil first asked me, I said I really may not be that interested in doing it because I'm really not all that familiar with it. But something Phil said led me to believe that I should be here, so here I am. I usually come from, as any of you that has been here before has seen any of the YouTube stuff, I usually approach things from a design perspective, and I think that can be done here as well. So I think that's probably where I'll go. I'll try to stay away from politics as much as I can, because like I said, I don't think it solves anything. We're already talking about religion. You don't want to put politics in it, do you? Isn't that impolite somehow or another? Yeah. Anyway, so other than that, there is a website that I have. I forgot to bring my cards, but it's called the Areopagus Project. That's a mouthful, isn't it? AREOPAGUS project.com. And I think I'll just shut up and listen to the other presentations now.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Angie?
Well, sure. I'll give you just a little bit of background about myself. I think will help where I stand on this topic. And first off, I'm grateful to be able to be here, and that all of you came to listen. So thank you. And that Kelly's willing to have the conversation, and then I get an opportunity to chat with River. So Don mentioned I'm the director of the Speakers Bureau. We go out and do panels and tell our personal stories. So my background, if you will, is a degree in education. Aside from that, I was a middle school teacher for 4 years here in California. And that is really my qualifications, if you will, to be on this panel. I don't claim I'm an expert of anything. I'm very much growing every day and becoming more self-aware in my personal life. I happen to share my life with a wife. My wife, Jo, and I live in Long Beach. We have an almost 4-year-old daughter, Justice. I came out as gay, and that's the term I use to identify myself. I'm happy to answer questions on that, of why I don't use the word lesbian as well. I came out when I was 18, and I came out in rural Indiana. My parents are conservative, Missouri Synod Lutheran. I was raised in a very, what I would consider your typical American family, 2 kids, a dog, and focus on education, doing the right thing, and going to church every Sunday, if not more. So my background was very much about faith and family. And when I came out, it was a big wow, I think, a big shock to my parents. And I did not know, I didn't have a clue I was gay until that time. I grew up, I'm 46 years old, so I grew up in a time, believe it or not, without the internet, where you could not look up the word and find a definition instantly. I also grew up in a time where there were no role models on TV. So when I think back, there was no one that I could point to and go, oh, that's what I am. And so it took me a while to figure it out. Looking back, I probably should have known that I was attracted to the same sex when I was probably 7 or 8 years old, when I think back to my actual experiences. And it had nothing to do with sex in any way, shape, or form. It was about how I felt inside. So from that point on, freshman in college, I started to identify as gay. I started basically the dating life at that point, and relationships, and what most people do when they're in middle school and high school. I started in freshman year of college, so I always felt a little behind, if you will. And that journey then proceeded to where I am today. Have had many struggles with my family. When I came out, their basic message was, if this is the way you are, we're not going to support you in this. They never retracted their love, but it was very clear that they didn't agree with what I was doing in my life or how I felt. So it created a big divide for us. One of my biggest challenges was religion. And I think it is for a lot of people in the LGBTQ community. What I see within the personal stories that I hear, and I've heard many, I actually facilitate our trainings for pflag. So I've literally heard hundreds of stories from parents and lesbian people, gay and trans people. And it's either culture or religion that generally creates the biggest hurdles. And when families can be open and approach those topics with love and respect and understanding, good things happen. When they're not, there's a lot of bad things or negative things that I hear and see in our community. So I truly believe, and then I'll let River introduce himself. I truly believe for me that being gay, being who I am, is a blessing. I believe I'm meant to be here in this moment, in this place, because of the experiences that I've had, and that part of my gift and what I believe in is that I was put here for a reason, and I definitely believe in something higher than me that's in charge. I don't claim a particular religion or a particular God, if you will, at this point in my life. I think that my faith is stronger than it's ever been and was ever sitting in a church pew. I've taken my own personal journey with what I believe in my faith, and it's very strong today. And so I just hope that by me being here, we can have an open dialogue. I believe that everyone has a truth and everyone's different, and that's what makes us so beautiful in this world. So I come with an open heart and an open mind. I know I'm going to learn something today, and I hope that we can have an open dialogue about the topic. Thanks.
Thank you. River?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I'm very similar story to her, so I won't get much into that. But I grew up in rural Kentucky, very, very small town. Our high school had like 300 kids in the entire school out of all the grades, so very, very small town. And of course, I'm bisexual. That's how I define myself. I'm hold sort of a different view than maybe a lot of people in the LGBT community. I do not like terms. I personally don't like letters. I call myself an atheist. I don't like that term either, but for all purposes of the word, I am an atheist. And I wanted to make the point, though, because I have a YouTube channel, and I get a lot of this online, that the reason I'm atheist is because I'm bisexual. It has little to almost nothing to do with that. I would be an atheist if I wasn't a member of the LGBT community. So my reasoning for being atheist really has very little to do with the LGBT issue, but I do believe that religion is the largest factor, or if not one of the largest factors, maybe the only factor in LGBTQ oppression. So I think it has a lot to do with that. Growing up in small town Kentucky, religion was really the main reason for oppression. And luckily, I wasn't religious. My parents weren't particularly religious. They weren't atheists, but I went to the church every now and then, but I didn't really grow up in it a lot. And as far as the question of God or religion, I'm very science-based, very matter-of-fact. I believe there is a logical and biological explanation for every single thing that occurs in our universe. And I think if we don't have a logical explanation for something, we just haven't found it yet. And personally, for me, there is no evidence whatsoever to suggest the existence of a God that I've seen. And to me, there's no reason in the 21st century to subscribe to that belief, but that's my opinion. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Kelly, both Angie and River talked about religion being an obstacle to getting over with discrimination and oppression and so forth. And since you are the person of the utmost faith here on this particular panel, what do you have to say about that?
I believe there's a, how can I put it, a misconception of who God is. Lots of different places, and that's not exclusive of the LGBT community. There's the atheist community, there's scads, even different, what you guys would consider religious faiths have arguments between each other. Islam has not discrimination, I shouldn't say that, but different opinion than Christians do, and so do Jews. So there's a search for truth, I believe, everywhere. And I believe when you actually consider what Jesus said, he's very accepting and very loving and wants better for our lives. And I think when you evaluate the design aspect, as I mentioned at the start, I believe that he's trying to direct us to a place that doesn't cause problems in our lives. I come from that perspective. So I don't really call it religious, though, because religion is a bunch of rules that none of us can abide by. And I don't go that way at all. To me, the New Testament talks about grace. And if it wasn't about grace, then I would be in a bigger problem as anybody is, because I didn't have the particular issues that, no, I shouldn't say issues, but life choices you guys have. But I had my own. I had my own set of examples that made it so I was going down the wrong path. I was going to drink myself to death, or experiment with, the stuff that goes along with it. I'm not going to get into it, but I was a bar hopper, and everything that goes along with being a bar hopper, I was performing. So you guys can plug that in wherever you want to, okay? So my lifestyle wasn't anything that was healthy for me. And when I came to the point where I wanted to decide whether there was a God or not, or actually if he was real, we need to talk about that, River, because that's an interesting topic. I started realizing that my life choices were not that great. They were not healthy for me. And when that changed, lots of things changed. It didn't change instantly. I made plenty of mistakes. And as my wife will tell you, I still make them now. It's my wife and my daughters back there. They'll tell you that I'm not perfect, but I'm trying. So that's my perspective. I don't follow along with legalism that is, I think, rampant sometimes in Christianity. You have to do this, do that, do the other thing for God to love you. I don't agree with that in the slightest, and I don't believe that's what the New Testament teaches. I believe it teaches that God loves you right now just as you are, but he doesn't want you continuing in destructive things in your life, drinking yourself to death, taking drugs so you're not in reality doing all the things that the New Testament talks about. And of course, one of those is lifestyle choices. So that's where I think I'd like to travel down. Like I said, stay away from politics as much as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And Angie or River, whichever one of you feels comfortable with this is okay. And I believe that Kelly mentioned a couple of times lifestyle choices or lifestyle. So would either one of you want to comment on that particular thing?
Well, I certainly will, because I can identify with much of what you said. And for me, coming out was when I really had to take a look at my personal faith and what I really believed in. And it's really when I truly found grace and I understood what forgiveness and all of the things that I'd been taught in church that didn't make sense, that sounded like mumbo jumbo, that when I asked questions about, I got no real answers, that when I searched inside myself, I actually found the answers for. So what's interesting to me about the word choices that you use is, I know my choice was happiness, and my lifestyle is to provide for my family, to go hiking, to watch a basketball game every now and then. Like, for me, that's my lifestyle, right? Gay is not a lifestyle for me. Just like picking up a pen and writing with my right hand is not a lifestyle. It's just who I am. I can't write with my left hand. So it's not a choice. I know I didn't wake up one morning and go, oh, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna decide to be gay. It's as in me as the color of my eyes or the hand that I write with. And unless you have that innate understanding of yourself, which most people have that innate understanding of being a heterosexual, you can't identify with me because you're not feeling what I'm feeling, just like I can't identify with a heterosexual that feels attracted to the opposite sex. I don't know if that makes sense, but for me, it's not a choice. My choice was happiness. And had I not been me, what I found was I was completely unhappy. I was making bad decisions. I was drinking. I was going to bars. I was doing all these things, trying to figure things out and escape, and struggling with my faith. And when I decided, what is this? It really was looking at myself and going, Angie, are you going to make yourself happy, or are you going to make your parents happy? Because my parents were who were driving at that point. This is not how you should be. And religion was driving. This is a sin. You're going to hell. If you're this way, this is what's going to happen. And I looked at all of it and I went, I know I'm a good person. I know I live my life with respect and morality. I try to make the best decisions I can every day. Yes, I mess up. We all do. but I don't believe that I'm judged and going to hell for those things. I believe that that's an opportunity for me to grow and appreciate and move forward in that. So, I mean, my life is about love. It's about respect. I mean, there's a line in the Bible that gets a lot of use that I don't know we actually adhere to much about treat others the way you want to be treated, that good old golden rule. I mean, that's the basis for how I live my life every day. And I'll say one more thing, and I think our community gets lumped into, as Christians do, a stereotype. I'm not promiscuous. I'm monogamous. I'm not out doing drugs and having sex parties and looking for multiple sex partners. Like, I don't know what people perceive of the gay community. Here's my family. I mean, this is us. Here's what Justice drew as her family the other day at 3 years old. Like, this is us. We're not some crazy gay lifestyle. We're just a family trying to do the right thing.
So briefly, River, would you like to add anything to what she said about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as it being a choice or not, in my opinion, she's completely correct. I mean, I ask people who are heterosexual, you know, when did you make the choice? And I was lucky enough that my parents were very, very accepting and very open to LGBT issues. But I remember my mother said, being gay, I understand, but those people who try to say they like both, I think they're just in denial. Well, that so happened to be the letter of the alphabet soup that I was. And I remember, man, I like the girls, but man, I kept saying, Mom, I think this is real. You know, I thought it would go away, but it never did. So, yeah, it's absolutely not a choice. It's ingrained within you, and I think it's definitely something that comes from birth and inside the womb. And yeah, it's definitely not a choice at all, and I would totally agree with her. And I see how it would be hard for someone who is heterosexual to understand that, but no, it's not a lifestyle choice. And I like what she said about it not being a lifestyle. I mean, the color of my skin is no more a lifestyle that I have than my sexual preference. And I agree with her. I mean, there is a false sense of everybody being promiscuous. Now, some of them are, but a lot of heterosexual people are promiscuous as well. So certainly, I agree with her totally on that.
Thank you. And Kelly, you said something I find interesting, because you talked about...
I'm glad. I said
what?
something interesting. I'm glad I said something interesting.
No, you did. You talked about, you seem to make a distinction between God and religion. And you seem to also make a distinction between New Testament and Old Testament. But if people are, I thought I heard you say that.
Well,
And-
I was just talking about the New
one last
Testament.
little thing.
But yeah, there is a distinction. I agree.
Yeah, one last little thing is that when people go to quote Scripture as a means of rationalizing their discrimination against those in the LGBTQ community, I mean, we agree that happens. Some of that Scripture is from the Old Testament, from Leviticus, and some of it is from the New Testament. There's some stuff in the book of Romans and stuff. So, because you can still be into the New Testament and still find rationalizations for discrimination. So if you could, I mean, that's kind of a broad kind of a thing there, but maybe I'm throwing you a bunch of different baskets.
Sure.
But if you could kind of sum that up a little bit as those distinctions.
Well, first thing I would say is discrimination part. I'm not real comfortable with that word, because I don't think that's what's happening. In that, and there is discrimination involved. That's certainly the case. Lots of groups that would be considered under the, I don't know, what would you call it, Christian umbrella, I guess, would say something like that. You don't deserve to do this, you don't deserve to do that, all the rest of those things. And you're right, there's things in both testaments that talk about it. I believe that is more from a design perspective, in that there's, it's like any other route you take. Okay, let's say route, okay? If you look at it from a design perspective, let me just get into that for a minute. So from a design perspective, there's one relationship that God endorses. He does not endorse adultery, cheating on your wife. He does not endorse sex before marriage, and that's any type. He's not singling out one group and saying, boy, this is the worst of all. He was just as upset with me and doing what I was doing. And so that isn't coming down on one particular, I don't know how to describe it, choice that we make. He's about having his design used in the way he designed it to be used. And if you look at the record of diseases that we have right now, at this point, right now, 30 sexually transmitted diseases that are at epidemic levels, the one item that you can't direct it to is marriage between a man and a woman for life. Now, you said the Christian community has the same amount of troubles. They certainly do, because nobody seems to want to go down that road, and I didn't either. So trying to label the Christian community as the ones that are doing everything right, they certainly aren't. You guys are exactly right, they're not. But we aren't Christ. All we do is try to follow him. And unfortunately, we don't always do that very well. And we don't give a very good example. But when you come down to the design perspective, like I wanted to mention, that's where it comes to, that's where the rubber meets the road. In that relationship, a man and a woman married for life, if that was the case and everybody followed it, we would have none of the diseases that are, and I'm not going to name them off because everybody knows what they are, but we wouldn't have any of those because none of those come around from that relationship. And I'm not saying that, it's like, I don't know, holier than thou or whatever you want to mention it. I'm just saying that's how it was designed to function.
Okay, well,
and if you don't function it that way, it's just like taking, and I'm going to make this on just products, okay? If you take your Ford Escort and try to race the Baja 1000 with it, you're not going to make it very far because it was not designed to do that. On the other hand, if you take a truck that's got large pillow tires on it, jacked up rims out or the body out of the way, and four-wheel drive, you'll probably make it through the Baja 1000 pretty well because it was designed to do that. And I think that's where the difference is. I think that's where I would state it.
Okay, well, I have one question.
Sure. And if I didn't answer the question, bring it back to me again because I got off on track.
Okay. Your answer is whatever your answer is. That's fine. Okay. I have no trouble with that. But you said that the one relationship that does not transmit diseases,
sexually transmitted diseases.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is one man and one woman for life.
Right.
Okay. Why could it not be two women for life or two men for life?
Well, the statistics just don't show that.
But I mean if you start with two women, and let's assume in all these cases the people are starting, they don't have a disease.
Right.
Okay, so they're not they're not with somebody else. So why couldn't it be two women for life or two men for life?
Okay, I knew it was going to come down this direction, so let's go there. I wrote down some stuff on this for the particular question. As far as the two women for life, that's different. I think it's as far as the studies that I've read about, and this isn't something that comes from the Bible. This just comes from the CDC and other places that I looked at. The two women for life, and I'm not trying to judge anybody. Okay, I'm just trying to pass along information. All right, two women's for life. It's not as much of a physical thing because as far as I know, I don't believe there's any of the sexually transmitted diseases that come around for that, as far as I know. I didn't read all about it, but as far as I know, I couldn't find any. But on the level, and maybe this isn't affecting you, and if it's not, just forget about what I said. But it's more of a psychological or mental issue, at least from what I read. As far as men goes, and I'm not saying this is where it came from, because nobody does know where it came from, but AIDS comes around from it, and it's not exclusive to the homosexual male community, but it's mainly there. So that's where I would say that the design thing, and again, I'm not trying to judge anybody over anything, I'm just saying the design points towards that's not how it was designed to function.
Okay, so you would
Can I comment on that, Don?
You go ahead.
I think that there's so much there that I do not have the statistics, but there's just so much there that's I do not agree with, and that's just simply not true. We know that sexually transmitted disease can happen when you have unprotected sex. So in any case, you can transmit a disease, whether you're having heterosexual sex or homosexual sex. I think that's a fact. So when it comes to choice, it's who are you having sex with? And there are, I don't know numbers, but there are a lot of heterosexual people who are having unprotected sex with women and men. And they may not say they're having homosexual sex. There's a lot of heterosexual men that will not claim to, but there's a lot of diseases being transmitted because of those types of relationships as well. So the other thing you said that I just have to comment on is, to my knowledge, there's nothing wrong with me psychologically. I don't have a dysphoria. I don't have anything mentally wrong with me, and neither does my wife. And we are monogamous. We are, we both were tested before we had the baby. Like, we take great pride in our physical and our health. And I think, again, you can lump people into categories, and to say all LGBTQ people are this way and all non-LGBTQ people are this way is just completely untrue. We're such a huge spectrum of humanity, and all of that affects all of humanity. So religion out of it completely, I just think there's a lot of things that you said that just aren't true.
River, you look like you have a, Doug, get back.
Okay.
And River, you look like you have a comment here.
I just wanted to add one quick point. I had a person in Kentucky a couple years ago. He said, just look at AIDS. Look at what happened with AIDS. That's proof that male-on-male sex is not normal. But it has nothing to do with their sex. It's because they didn't realize that they needed to use condoms to stay protected. So it has nothing to do with the sex. It's because it is unprotected. And it's not because God is punishing gay people.
You had a comment.
I do, on a couple. Actually, I think I started off with saying that I didn't say that it was everybody. So I'm not, and again, I'm not saying it's everybody. I'm just going to the studies. And out of the group, that particular group, from the study I read, and I'm trying to find it in here, but unfortunately can't see it, there was more psychological problems. Is that for everybody? Of course not. Some people get along just fine. And all I'm saying is it's more so than another group that you could pick out, like married women. I don't know. That's how their study was. River, you said, I'm sorry, and all sex is, repeat for me one more time, because you said something about all sex is.
Who are you talking to?
River, I'm sorry.
I simply said that unprotected sex is the cause for diseases, and it has nothing to do with the gender of the two people.
Okay. Something I wanted to bring up with the CDC and their directives, and this is CDC certainly isn't a Christian organization. The number one route or avenue they say for protecting yourself from sexually transmitted diseases, first one is abstinence. The second one is monogamous relationships. And the third one is condoms. Now, what does a condom do, though? A condom keeps you from having actual contact. So that's not a good evaluation, because that keeps you from the contact. What is the condom supposed to do? What's the idea behind it? To keep you away from having the contact. And I believe that is a testimony to the fact that there is that to come along. Now, I think
sure
you guys
a
are
condom
trying.
keeps the sperm from going into a woman's vagina.
Right, but let me just.
Right? That's the purpose of a condom.
Right.
And to protect you from having contact with who you're having sex with if you need protection from that. So,
Right.
I mean, I'm not following your point.
My point, maybe I didn't make it very clear. I do that quite often. My point is that the condom is keeping you from the contact that would normally cause the problem. It's not saying that the problem doesn't exist. It's saying that it does exist.
Right.
And that you need protection from it. But here's, and both you mentioned something that I wanted to address. Angie, right? Yeah, okay.
Yep.
You mentioned something about sex in general. What I'm talking about, and when I make that display of what God directed sex to be between a man and a woman for life, we're not doing that right now. So the diseases are there. And can you get them even if you're in a monogamous relationship? Yeah, you can. You can get blood transfusion, the rest of it. What I'm talking about is from the beginning. if it wasn't for the way all of us, and me included, have decided to conduct ourselves, that wouldn't exist. Now, there's some communities that are less susceptible to it. One of them is the Orthodox Jewish community, because they have that idea of staying together, and there's a lower percentage of that happening going on. But my point is this: it's not that it doesn't exist, because obviously it does. And some people can go life doing all the stuff they want to do and never catch anything, certainly, and they can even do it without having the condoms on. I think they're putting it at risk. It's not that everybody's going to get it. But my point with that evaluation I was making was that from the beginning, if we followed the guidelines that are in the Bible to do, it's no sex before marriage. Once you get married, you don't cheat on your wife. And if you come to the point where you're 65 or 70 years old and your husband dies or wife dies, if you want to try to find somebody that's doing the same thing, then those type of situation, and I'm looking for a design perspective again, in that type of a situation, these sexually transmitted diseases wouldn't exist. My point is, and I'm not laying it at the door of LGBT community any more than I do the heterosexual community. They all do it. And the reason why we have it is because people don't want to abide by the guidelines and the design that I believe is clear.
Okay, so that's your basically biblically based solution. I would say that
I think it's design. Just
right.
for a second,
Okay.
I think it's design as well. I agree. That's
right.
the way that the Bible dictates. The Bible advises to live,
Right.
but it's also. I think you can take it from design too.
I would also say, as somebody who's over 70, I'm not dead yet.
You seem alive to me, Don. You seem to be doing pretty well.
So, if we can move to a different area here. Some people figured that when the Supreme Court handed down its decision of Obergefell v. Hodges, which struck down various laws around the country against same-sex marriage, that it was kind of done. You know, we're kind of like, that's the big hurdle in equality, and it's going to be a free ride from now. And there was the issue of, wrapped up with that was the issue of marriage equality. Who does it harm? I remember the comedian Wanda Sykes said that if you disagree with same-sex marriage, then all you have to do is just make sure you don't marry somebody of the same sex, and you're covered.
Pretty logical.
So within that realm of marriage equality and who does it harm, which is kind of a fundamental issue of the original, what was known as the Proposition 8 trial in California in 2010, that went through 2013. So we're past the area of marriage equality being legal. We got that, that's done. So then we might ask ourselves, why do we still have discrimination? Why is this stuff still lingering? Did we think we were going to be over this, but we seem not to be? And you had a lot of time. I'm going to turn over this side of the table. And River, maybe you want to go first, or whichever one of you wants to go first.
Well, I think going back to what Kelly just described is the reason we still have discrimination, and it really goes back to, I think, the basis of people thinking that in the LGBTQ community that you're choosing to be the way that you are. So it's, for me, that's the core issue, is if you can understand that this wasn't a choice, this is just who I am, and then understand that all I'm looking for are the same rights and responsibilities as everybody else out there, then it's easier to understand, and it's the discrimination is lessened, I would say. Anytime you categorize someone and make it those people or their choosing, you're automatically discriminating because you're creating a category of other. So, I mean, I remember when I have a picture here of us in July of 2013. My wife was 8.5 months pregnant when the Supreme Court ruling happened, and it was huge for us. We had already been married in 2 other states, and we did not at that time have coverage in all 50 states because the ruling hadn't come down. And by being able to get married before our daughter was born, we were both on the birth certificate as her parents. We had been advised prior to that we would both have to adopt her. We were $25,000 in at that point through in vitro and legal and all of that. So in terms of choice, we made that choice in order to create our family. But that ruling allowed us to have the rights and responsibilities together that my brother and his wife and his 2 kids have, my mom and dad have. Like, it gave us that same sense of safety and security wherever we go as a family. And those things, I believe, are everyone's human right. And I can't choose who I love. I just love who I love. And I love her, and I wanted to marry her and have a family with her.
Right. Well, as far as discrimination goes after the laws were passed, I mean, it's not shocking. Not everybody is going to feel the same way about it. And I just think the main reason for opposing same-sex marriage is religion or faith or God. I mean, there's no other way to get around it. That's the main reason it is opposed. And I would just ask to those people who are religious, you can believe that gay people are going to hell, or you can believe that it's a sin, or believe that it's terrible. And that's fine. I'm all for that. I mean, you can have that opinion, and you have a right in this country to be vocal about that opinion. But what you don't have the right to do is to dictate our laws for all of us based on that single opinion you have yourself. And I interviewed a minister one time, and I said, okay, that's fine that you believe same-sex marriage is a sin, but can't you in your mind understand that other people feel that it isn't, and other people want to do that? So why can't we make our laws to the benefit of people of all different opinions and all different lifestyles? And he said no, he still didn't believe that, because he believed that as a person of faith, he needed to use the Bible to dictate our laws. And I just think that's very dangerous. So my whole point is, you don't have to be on board with LGBTQ issues, but other people want to be. So just don't do it if you don't want to be part of it, but let other people.
Do you have a response to that?
Sure. Okay, so choosing to be, I wanted to address that for a second, just from the studies that have been done. There's twin studies in Norway, there's twin studies in Australia, there's twin studies in probably a couple other countries that I'm forgetting that would be contrary to your opinion on that. But let's just say, for the sake of discussion, that that's true. I think there's reasons to believe it's not, but let's just say for a second it's true.
I'm sorry, say for that, what is true?
That you're born to be that way, I guess. Is that a good
Absolutely.
description? Okay. So born to be that way. I think, as I said, the twin studies in several different countries tend to disagree with that idea.
In what way? That one twin is and one twin's not?
Right, and they're
Happens
raised
all the time.
They're raised oppositely, as opposed to having it passed down to you. Okay, being that the people that brought you into the world are more than likely not that way, I'm not really sure how that trait gets passed along. But just for the sake of argument, let's say it does. Okay, let's just say for a second that it does. I'm of Irish heritage. And one could say that my drinking propensity before I changed for that particular aspect of my life could have been blamed because I was Irish. Because a lot of people they have a drinking problem in Ireland, and I'm Irish, so we could say that I was had a propensity for that as well, and I can say, well, I'm predisposed to be a drinker, and I can't stop it. It's an unhealthy thing, and it can be stopped. So I don't even, let's say for a second, even that if it is, which I think is at least debatable, I think it's something that can be a choice away from it as well. I don't think it's predetermined any more so than what is it? Propensity to do deep sea diving. I don't think it's something that can't be changed.
Well,
if you have it in mind to change it.
A couple of things.
Sure.
On your twin studies, I happen to know personally a family had 2 identical twin boys. And when I first met them, they were in their early 20s, and I couldn't tell them apart.
Okay.
I mean, I can now, but I couldn't tell them apart. And one of them was as heterosexual as you can imagine, joined the military. He was working on an aircraft carrier assembling bombs before they went up to the flight deck. All right, and the other one is a gay man, and he works as a teacher, working with developmentally disabled children. I'm not sure what the correct term is. All right? And so there's a perfect set of twins, and they had a very, very Christian upbringing. Their parents are regular church attenders and so forth. So what would you say to that particular situation?
I think you just made my point for me. It's a choice.
So
They
you think
they both came from the same set of DNA,
Okay.
so to speak.
Okay, so
or
that's
at least a
Okay.
sharing of it, but they have different choices.
Okay.
That's what the twin study was all about. If this is supposed to be passed along as a attribute when you were born, then you would expect twins, which are the best. And they were talking about, I guess there's different kinds of twins. I guess it's maternal twins and paternal twins. The maternal ones were the ones they decided to make the study on, because I guess there's more similarities with them or something. I don't know. I'm certainly not a geneticist. But that, if it actually was passed along in the DNA, then you would expect that to be at least an overwhelming majority that are that way, and it's not.
Okay, so that's your position.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm just saying that's the choice part. Now, let me address some of the other things that both of you said. For me, anyway, I have actually changed my position over the last probably 3 or 4 years on whether or not the marriage thing, that part. Now, you brought up Proposition 8. I voted whichever way it was that gay marriage wasn't going to be allowed. Since then, I've changed my mind, because I truly believe that, at least in biblically, God allows you to make choices, and your choices are your own. He tries to direct you to the right ones, but what he feels is the design aspect keeps you in the safest position. But if you decide not to, that's up to you. God's given out a choice. And I was wrong about voting against it, because that's a choice that everybody needs to be able to make. So as far as the marriage thing goes, if that's what you want to choose, I don't think the government should step in and tell you not to. What I would say is that choice, and you're right, God says these, and I want to make this clear. God says in the Bible that those that practice these things, and again, it's not just that one thing. There's lots of things: lying, stealing, all the rest of it. He's got a design that he wants us to follow, and he said those who practice those things will not enter the kingdom of God. And that's what his word is. That's what he says. So with that, he doesn't say, well, the government should never allow this. What he does say is that those that practice these things and those that encourage them to do so, he's against that as well.
So you are now okay with same-sex marriage, so legalization?
I'm okay with the marriage part. If
You're okay with the marriage part.
if that's what someone chooses to do, because
Okay.
God's about choice.
Okay.
He wants you to make the choices that you make.
Okay. So
On
let
the
me-
other hand, what he intends for you to do is to have a healthy lifestyle. And what he wants you to do it would be different, just like he wanted me to do things different. As I said, I was a drunk. I used to drink way too
Okay.
much. And the day that ended, it ended, because he ended it for me. He took away my desire to do that anymore. He took away my desire to go to the bars and do all the rest of the stuff. It's not because, I'm like, I can't go there because I'll get, influenced by it again. I have no desire to it. I can go there if I wanted to. I can have a beer if I wanted to, and I have. It's not that part. It's taking it to excess.
Okay.
And he changed my desires on that. So when I say that, I'm not saying that God is okay with relationships that he deems as to be against his design, because he's not. But as far as your choices go, you make those yourself. You decide whether you're going to follow your desires or whether you're going to follow God's desire for you.
Okay, it seems like we clearly have a point of this discussion whether it's not going to resolve itself, whether this is a choice or not, right? Kelly's on his position and you folks are on your position.
Right.
But Kelly did admit that he voted, and in the Proposition 8, you voted yes if you were opposed to same-sex marriage, and you voted no if you were for same-sex marriage. That was what the vote went.
Right.
He did admit that he voted against the legalization of same-sex marriage, and now he's changed his mind on that. Do either one of you think that maybe you're making some progress here. Maybe you're moving things forward a little bit.
Well, I know for me that just even the use of the word wife, people relate to, they understand it. The minute we were married and it wasn't, this is my partner or my girlfriend, that there's a familiarity to it amidst the majority, which is the heterosexual community, that can be understood. I think for my family, my parents now understand it in a different way because it's commitment. So when you could not get married, who knows what they're doing, right? You must be promiscuous. No, there's a commitment when you get married. So I'm committing to this person, which I think is also easier to understand for the majority. And I think that, you know, a lot of people are evolving on the topic, if you will. There have been so many people for so many years. I've heard so many stories of people who didn't come out until they were 50, 60 years old because of fear, or who got married because of social pressure and religious pressure. And, you know, who, when you can live in your truth and actually be who you are and be committed and have a family. I mean, we had a young person say the other day, oh my gosh, it's so nice to see a family. Like, I can do this. I can get married and I can have a family, which it wasn't that way years ago because it wasn't possible. No one was seeing it. So I think that the more we see families like mine and we understand that it's not these crazy people over here, it's just real people living life, that people will start to evolve and see that we all really, at the basis of it, I believe, want the same thing. We want commitment and love and family and respect.
Did you have anything to add to that?
Well, I just wanted to add to something he mentioned really quick about as far as the genetics being passed down of homosexuality. And I mean, he has a point. We don't understand it yet. It doesn't quite make sense that two heterosexual parents can pass on a gay gene that we're looking for. My dad is gay, so it's not unheard of. But the point is, we don't know. We don't have all the answers yet. But even if it was a choice, and clearly it isn't, I know it isn't, LGBT people largely know that it isn't, but even if it was a choice, why does it matter? It would be no different than a choice in music. I mean, it doesn't matter. It goes back to the whole religion thing, and I know people base it on it's God's word or whatever, but there's no evidence for that. It's just a book.
Well, let me ask each one of the three of you a quick, this is a quick, almost a yes/no question. Okay, quick one. Do you know any people who are LGBTQ who have said they chose to do that?
No.
Do you?
No.
Do you?
I don't get into you probably guys have a lot more experience with that. I mean, I have friends that maybe. I certainly have customers that have chosen that lifestyle. So, but I don't ask, so I wouldn't know. That's not something that I can comment on.
I also don't have any straight friends who said they chose either.
Me neither.
That's what I said.
Do you have any straight friends that said they chose? Do you? Did you choose to be straight?
Again, I don't ask the question, so I don't know. Yeah.
Fair enough.
I think there's a real distinction, though, that people really get confused on, that sexual orientation and gender identity are two completely different things. And Don talked about the definitions at the beginning. And I think one of the things that when we talk in front of, especially college classes, in a human sexuality class, we're talking about sexuality, right? And we get some interesting questions. When you realize that your sexual orientation doesn't actually have to do with sex, you probably can think back for yourselves and remember your first crush. You know, and you remember the butterflies in your stomach. And I remember oh my gosh, the phone's ringing. It's gonna be her. And those butterflies happening. For each of us, it's different. And I don't know about you, but I didn't have to have sex to figure out what that feeling was and know what my attraction was. And I think that's the big differentiator, is that people tie it to sex, and it's not about sex. Sex is an act, and sex is a choice. But how I actually feel inside is who I am.
Would you like to comment on what she just said about that? The differentiation between sex and gender attraction?
I'm not really sure. Really have an answer to that. But I did want to talk to River about something that he had said as far as the existence of God. And I know we're not on that topic, but it's one that I talk about all the time. So
Same.
When you brought it in, I'm
Same
up
here.
that alley. So maybe we
Yeah.
could have a talk.
Okay.
As far as the existence of God, and leave any particular one out for now, what would you say for the fact that the universe had a beginning? The idea, physical concept, and law of cause and effect, the instructions that are in the DNA, and what they call the cosmological constant. Those are things that I believe point toward a designer. And I think it's hard to construct an apparatus that would explain those particular ideas minus a designer.
Right. No, and that's a good point. There are theories. I mean, we think that when the Big Bang happened, that was also the beginning of time, that time and space began with the Big Bang, and that before the Big Bang, there was no time for a creator to be in. Now, I know that's hard to wrap our heads around, and there are a lot of questions, but the answer is we don't know. And that's when a lot of people, to hold up their Bibles and hold up their religion. But there's certainly no evidence to suggest that any of that is the answer either. I mean, I think we don't know how it all began, but we're searching for it, and I don't think we have to jump to conclusions when we don't know. I mean, ancient people, they couldn't understand weather. They had no idea, no way to describe the weather patterns, and they implanted and inserted gods to explain the weather. Well, once our civilization got wiser and was able to discover more things, well, it's a natural phenomenon that occurs every day. We don't have those gods to describe it. So a lot of people have described God of the gaps. And when we can't explain things, society wants an answer, and they tend to insert a god. But the further we move forward, the less of a gap there is to insert that God in. So just because we can't explain it doesn't mean we need to make up a story about it.
So
Yeah, let me comment.
you
on that
asked him
if I
the
can.
question, that was your answer.
Let's go with a little exchange,
Yeah.
can we? Yeah. Okay. So you said God has no time frame. And if you were talking about a God that's described inside the universe, you have an excellent point, River. Excellent point. Because if you have a God inside the universe and the universe had a beginning, logically that doesn't make much sense, does it?
No.
Because how can a God create the universe if he's inside the universe and the universe had a beginning? That meant he had a beginning as well. But that's the difference between the God of the Bible and ones that are invented, for example, by the Hindus. God of the Bible says, in the beginning, time, God created the heavens, space, the earth, material, and a little later he says energy. Primrose and Hawking both said in the 70s that time, matter, space, and energy all had a beginning. And that's exactly what the Bible describes, somebody to begin it. He's outside time. So that idea that, I think you said there's no space for the creator since the time started as well. I would agree with you if you're talking about a God outside time, such as the Hindus propose. But that's not what the Bible describes. He's outside time. He started time.
Yeah, no, and I've heard that explanation many a times, that God has just always been, and he created time and space and all of that.
That's what the Bible describes him as, is eternal.
But in my opinion, you enter just as much of a lack of explanation. I mean, if God just always was, well, that seems like a pretty easy answer to get out of it. I mean, how did God begin? How did God start? Who created the creator?
If he's eternal, then he doesn't have a start.
That's an easy
I mean,
answer.
that's
an
a
easy
good
answer.
question. But that's a good question, River, inside the realm of time. It's where we exist. Everything that we deal with is time. We're supposed to get here at a certain time because it started at a certain time, right? But everything we deal with here is inside time. The idea of moving outside of time, that's difficult for us to do, I understand. But that is what the Bible describes. It describes him as eternal and describes him around prior to the existence of the universe.
Well, since we're talking about time,
That got off topic quickly, didn't it?
maybe we can put a rope around this thing and lasso it back into
Okay.
the subject. But that was okay. And regarding another issue of acceptance of people who are LGBTQ. There is a part of that subject which says that younger people are becoming more accepting than their grouchy old parents who are my age. And I know that, River, you're less than 1/3 my age. And I know that Angie spends a lot of time with people who are college age. So, and I'll give you a chance to respond to this.
Sure.
But since we have the youth group over here represented, maybe you can go first, because there seems to be this deal that that younger people are less bothered by having their gay friends in school, or by having the other parents in school. Maybe there's a same-sex parents in school, and the kids seem to be less bothered than the parents are by that. Would you like to answer that or deal with that?
Yeah, I think that's certainly true. I mean, we're making a lot of progress, and as time goes on, it does seem like the younger generations are extremely more accepting of LGBT issues in America. And there's also another statistic along with that, that young people in America are also overwhelmingly less religious. And that's unlike many places around the world. In some countries, the younger people tend to be more religious than the older, which is unheard of here. So I'm not saying whether that's related or not. I think it probably does have something to do with it. But yeah, we're becoming more and more open. And I think now, I mean, I know kids and the internet and all the social media, you know, that's what the old people complain about. But it's really, I think that has a lot to do with it. I think now with internet and instant access and instant communication, we can now see, look into the lives of other people. I mean, I think even just back in the 80s and even early 90s and 70s, it was even a lot worse then. And I think nowadays it's harder to just paint the picture that gay people or LGBT people are just these freaks. And I think now we can see in modern entertainment and on the internet, and we're able to look into the lives and see that these people are just like everybody else in every other way.
Thank you. And like I said, you have a particularly kind of unique perspective, because you are regularly on college campuses talking to college-age people. And what do you find with that?
Yeah, well, college, and I can tell you 4-year-olds, they're super progressive. 3 and 4-year-olds, they don't see gender, they don't see color. It's us who put those things into their sphere of what they understand. And my daughter has actually been probably a better teacher than even the college classes, of me recognizing how much of that is passed down. I mean, I grew up in a town where the Ku Klux Klan wasn't far away when I was growing up in the 70s. I could name on one hand the families in our community who were not white, right? I had a grandmother who used the N-word, and I clearly remember my father in the car one day saying, "Angie, you know, Grandma uses that word and you shouldn't use it." Now, had he used the N-word, what do you think I probably would have done? I would have continued that. So I think what we're seeing is education. I totally agree with River on information. What used to be a headline in the Seymour Tribune is now instantly available to the world. You can know what's happening. So it's moving faster. People have a view and that they never have had before, where they can see. And I think that we have to realize, and I thank you for putting me in the youth group, because I certainly don't feel it. We, meaning our older generations, have to realize that we're the ones creating discrimination and judgment. And if we allow these perfect little humans to be exactly who they are and to just foster who they are, watch what's going to happen. It's going to be the most beautiful thing. When we put limits on them and we oppress them, that's when trouble starts to happen. When I look at my generation, I know that that's the case for me. All the struggles I had were because of religion and culture and ethnicity, like dealing with those and unwinding those now in my 40s.
Kelly?
Okay, there's lots there. Okay, so let me read something from the CDC. Gosh, I did bring my glasses. Because my eyesight.
It's a symptom of
age.
Being not in the youth group.
We're to the right of the young people, Don, me and you. Not right politically, just sitting here. Okay, and not in politics. Again, I want to stay away from that. Okay, so I'm going to read this as per CDC. While sexually transmitted diseases, STDs, affects individuals of all ages STDs take a particularly heavy toll on young people. CDC estimates that ages 15 to 24 make up just over 1/4 of the sexually active population, but account for half of the 20 million new sexually transmitted infections that occur in the United States each year. So I disagree with both of you on the benefit of what's happened over the last 50 years. Some of it's good. I'm not saying that some of it isn't good, because we've came to the notion that because particular people have more melanin in their system than others do, that they should be degraded or felt as less important. In fact, I blame the Supreme Court for some of that. The Supreme Court in, the Dred Scott decision, decided that black people were only 3/5 of a human. So in the Supreme Court, coming along and trying to dictate to us what's moral, sometimes they get it right, sometimes they get it wrong. But my point is this: over the last 40 or 50 years, things have changed. I agree. But I'm not so sure they've changed for the better. The things that we're trying to say are okay now and trying to encourage, I'm not so sure that all of it's good. And I think these statistics that I just read off are a accusation against what has happened over the last 40 or 50 years, at least in that particular aspect.
Can I throw something back from the CDC? And this is out of their research this year. It's either 2016 or 2017. It says research suggests that LGBT teens experience better health outcomes when parents support their sexual orientation in positive and affirming ways, compared to teens who do not feel valued by their parents. LBG youth who feel valued by their parents are less likely to experience depression, attempt suicide, use drugs and alcohol, and become infected with sexually transmitted disease. So what this is talking about is the support, the openness, the ability to share. We know that suicide rates are higher. We know that drug abuse is higher. We know that sexually transmitted diseases are higher when kids don't have support.
Right, and that's true. I just wanted to throw in there, I don't have the exact number with me, but after same-sex marriage was passed as law throughout the country, new studies suggest that the teen suicide rate among LGBT teens has decreased.
So you had some data, which I'm not going to contest it. Well, I will contest one thing you said.
Okay.
You said it was the Dred Scott decision that was responsible for the 3/5 apportionment to people of color. Actually, that was actually wasn't the Dred Scott decision. It was the United States Constitution, but that predates that. But that was written into the Constitution, the 3/5 of a person. It was to get the slave states to go along with the Constitution.
But that's would have to check. Yeah, that's history,
that's
and I'll have to check on it. You may be right about that.
But
you were around then, weren't you?
I was around then.
Yes.
I was around then. Yeah.
I'm almost as old as you, Don, so we're both the same.
The part in Genesis where it says, "In the beginning, I was there then."
You got off the ark along with Noah? Okay.
I was there. So yeah. So you were talking about, we were talking about a growing level of acceptance with younger people for LGBTQ community. You took that and said that leads to a greater level of disease. They said that the reason that there might be a greater, whatever disease that might be there with kids who are LGBTQ is because of a lack of acceptance and nurturing and warmth on the part of their parents.
Let me make that clear, because I didn't say LGBTQ. I just said that and it's not just that.
Okay, then clarify that, please.
Yeah, this isn't talking about that alone. This is talking about in general. The idea that the sexually transmitted diseases are going on is without question, it is. And it's higher in that age group. And I believe the idea that everything's okay, that's being passed along, I believe that's part of it. No, but let me agree with something that Angie said. And me as a Christian, I'm instructed to do this. I'm instructed to love people. And whatever the choice they make is, that doesn't affect me loving them. So I agree with you about that decision that the CDC came up with. I agree 100%. I think parents, regardless of what choice their kids make, have to love them. They can tell them, that's not right, and these type of things can happen. Just like if you have a 5-year-old, you tell them not to run across the street in heavy traffic. I think that's being loving. But the idea that, because you've made this choice, I'm not going to talk to you anymore, you're not my kid anymore, all the rest of that stuff, that's alien to me. I wouldn't do that. I love my kid, and that's immutable. Because God loves us that way. God loves us regardless of our choices. Thank God for that, because I've made some bad ones. So I'm going to agree with you, Angie. I agree with you 100%. Parents need to love their kids regardless. And if they make wrong choices, they take drugs, whatever the case may be, you still love them. You might, warn them against things that, that the parent might believe is wrong. Mm-hmm. And if the parent really does believe there's a heaven and a hell, and the Bible dictates if you practice things that are practice things, that's an important word, practice things, that are against his will and his guidelines, then those that practice these things will not inherit the kingdom of God. And if parents believe that to be true, and I think there's good evidence that it is, then them saying, I don't think this is a good route for you, but I still love you. I still want you to come over for dinner. I still want to be involved in your life. That's a great thing, and I agree with you 100%, Angie.
Well,
it's a good start.
It is a good start, and I will tell you that has been the biggest challenge. And what I realized from my parents is that's exactly how they felt, and they still feel like they're protecting me in some way. And I also realized that this might sound like a weird way to describe it, but like their ticket to heaven is dependent on them telling me that I'm not okay, because it's their faith and their ability to get into heaven if they don't do right for me. And I don't know how. I've tried. I don't know how you get past that crossroads other than to identify it's a personal relationship with what you believe in. So I have to know that I'm okay with what I believe in, and I believe that they're okay with what their beliefs are. But like River said earlier, I don't believe it's okay to tell me that I'm not okay, right? Like I hear Kelly, and I can agree and disagree with some of the things that you're saying, and yet, just like you said, like my job is to show up in love and to love you and your highest self. That's what I see. So I think if we can all see each other that way, then some of this minutia that it becomes big stuff is lessened and goes away, and we just show up in love. That's what I do with my family now. And do I think they're 100% supportive of me? No, that still hurts. But that's what we do. My wife's family too. Evangelical Christian, we show up in love, and we know that's how we want them to show up for us.
So we can agree that parents should love and nurture their children.
Absolutely.
What a concept.
Yes.
All of us agree on that. Mm-hmm. Terrific.
And I would say it doesn't matter if you're heterosexual or homosexual, that you should do that for your children. And that because we're two women doesn't mean that we can't do that in the same way that a heterosexual couple couldn't for their kid. So I think that's also one of those things that gets debated a lot, like the health of the child and, what is this going to do? Is she going to be gay because she has two moms? And I look at all the families out there that, even in our sphere, in our community, that don't have two loving parents who are showing up for their kid. And what that does to a child. And I agree with a lot of what you say in terms of commitment, stability. These are the things that young people need and support. And I don't think that has to come from a heterosexual couple. I think that can come from loving people in a child's life.
Which kind of gives us to a question. And the question is, which is on the list here, which we're looking at getting to sooner or later, are children better off with heterosexual parents, or does it matter? And do any of you have any? You have some direct experience there. So, and I saw your hand go up, River. Okay. So guess what? You get to go next.
Okay, cool. No, it doesn't matter. And yes, I don't know if you have them here, but I imagine that if you do have statistics on this, you may present the statistics that show children raised under same-sex couples may have more mental issues or may have more struggles in life. And there are certainly statistics to show that. I think the pool that is tested is not big enough on each side to make a really good determination on that. But I will say in a lot of those same-sex couple instances, a lot of times the child is adopted, a lot of times during their teen years. So there are other factors as to why a child may have problems, but I don't think there's any hardcore evidence to suggest that it has anything at all to do with the sex of the parents. But I think some of those studies that show that kids do better off under opposite sex couples has to do with just general discrimination. And it also has to do with factors of the children in many cases being adopted and or on foster care or taken out of their homes that they grew up in. So there are other explanations for some of those statistics that might be brought up.
Did you have a response for that? How do you feel about that? Or do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I guess it comes down to what the end product you want to have. If you want to have an end product that your child is going to be successful in his career, her career, whether they're going to have a happy lifestyle here on this earth, I think River brought up some things that might lead you to think that that wasn't the case. But let's go move away from this life for a second. Let me ask both of you a question if I can. Are either of you okay with raising kids that would be instructed as to God's way to heaven? Would either of you be okay with that?
Absolutely. What I want to do for my daughter is what I didn't get for myself. I never had the opportunity. I never remember my parents sitting down and saying, here's what we believe, Angie. Here's the Lutheran faith. Missouri Synod Lutheran, German-based, here it is. And here's Buddhism and Hinduism and Catholicism and Islam and all the religions of the world. Let me get educated, and then let me figure out where I fit. And what do I believe? And that's what I want to give her. We actually joke that Justice will probably end up a conservative Christian, and we'll both be like, oh my God, what did we do? But you know what? Whatever, I want happiness for her. And whatever happiness looks like for her, that's what I want. I want her to understand the basic moral compass of love and respect and kindness, and to educate herself and to be informed. And wherever that path takes her, which I can't wait to watch, wherever she ends up in her faith is going to be beautiful, because it's going to be exactly where she's supposed to be. And it doesn't have to look like what I believe, and I'm perfectly okay with that.
All right. Yeah. Hey, if I ever had kids, I think it would be kind of cool to have a child who is religious. I think it would be good for a lot of
For some interesting dinners.
make for some interesting dinners. Yeah. I wouldn't have a problem with it. I would definitely be engaged in conversation, but it doesn't matter. It's not going to make me love them any less, and I would never push something on a child that I had. I mean, I was lucky enough that my parents never pushed a belief on me, and so I was able to make my own decisions in life as far as what I believed or didn't believe.
Can I ask River a question real quick on that? Can I ask River a question and take your moderator job real quick?
Yes.
I'm just curious if you have an understanding for your parents in rural Kentucky, what gave them that openness? Because I'm fascinated by geography and like small town small-mindedness versus open-mindedness. What do you think it was for your parents they were okay with who you are?
Well, my dad always struggled with LGBT issues. Today he identifies as gay, but he repressed that for so many years due to religion. I mean, he talked to me about, they went to the kind of churches where you were like rolling on the floor and, speaking in tongues. So he really struggled with that a lot of years. He would lay awake at night just crying himself to sleep. But he didn't tell me that till later. But my parents, I was lucky enough that my parents was able to let me travel a lot and see a lot of the world. And a lot of kids in those areas don't get exposed to those things when they're young, and they're just stuck where they are. And so I think exposure has a lot to do with that.
Do you have any response to any of that?
I guess you guys both answered my question, and I'm happy to hear the answer. In particular, River, if your son, daughter, whichever the case may be, came to you and asked you why you're an atheist, and what would be your response?
About why I was an atheist? Mm-hmm. Well, I would say because I follow the evidence, and there's no evidence whatsoever to suggest that atheism isn't the answer.
isn't that directing them in a certain direction, though? Wouldn't that be directing them away?
No, if they ask me, I would give them a direct answer, but
Right.
I wouldn't push that on them or take them to a atheism building every Sunday.
Well, since we have the atheist who said it would be okay to have a religious child, you're the Christian. Would it be okay for you to have an atheist child?
I think in both instances, they're going to make their own choice, right? If that's how they came, I would try to influence them, talk to them about the evidences for it, just like River was going to talk to them about the evidence against it. So I think we both have our what you say, preferred route that our kids would take. So I'm in agreement with River in that instance. I would, if one of my kids came to me and had that issue, as a matter of fact, I don't know, maybe right now one of them's having a little bit of that, maybe, grandkid. I'm going to try my best to show them the evidences for it. And let them make it, obviously they're going to make their own decision. And all kids do that, as much as we may not like it. All kids do that. They make their own decisions eventually. And they're going to come up and they're going to have their life experiences, and that's going to affect them.
I love that. I love that they do.
Yeah, and they're going to have their life experiences, and that's the route they're going to take. But for me, as someone who believes in heaven, and conversely believes in the opposite, I would try to direct them away from the opposite, because I truly believe 100% in my heart that it exists. And I wouldn't want my kid going there.
We kind of got onto this bit of the topic with the question about children being better off or not with heterosexual parents or with same-sex parents. And Angie and Joe have a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I might have missed it, but I'm not sure I heard a response from you as if they are better off if there is something that you can point to that says we can have biological mommy and daddy and 3.2 kids and 2 station wagons, or we can have mommy and mommy or daddy and daddy and some kids, and given equal educational backgrounds of parents and equal economic backgrounds of parents and so forth, given those sorts of things, so you don't have one set of parents that's dealing drugs or something. But given as much equitability in that as possible, do you see any benefits or shortcomings one way or the other?
Well, as we discussed about the heterosexual community and their propensity for not following the guidelines for it, God's laws and God's wishes for us, maybe not. But one thing I will say is that if a kid grows up in a home that is heterosexual, then that's kind of the role model, isn't it? I think it's a role model. They see it every day, and no kids want to think their parents are doing something wrong, so to speak. So in that instance, as far as the long-term thing about the route to heaven, that isn't the only thing. But I do believe it presents to the child a role model that is more towards what God's word says, a man and a woman. And that doesn't mean they're going to, though. I mean, there's lots of kids that grow up in a Christian family that don't go that way. So there's no guarantee there.
Okay.
So I would say that I'd rather have it that way, but that's no guarantee of the child coming out whichever way they're going to come out. Because a lot of times that has to do with life experiences afterwards. I think you can teach them, in Proverbs it says to raise your child in the way of God, and he will not soon depart from it. That doesn't mean there's not going to be bumps in the road. Of course there is. But that's what the Bible says about the topic, so I'll go with that.
As a parent, do you have anything to respond to him with?
I just know I had lots of heterosexual role models. That's all I saw all day long. And it would have really helped me to see the opposite of that, to know that it was possible. So it's felt like, as a same-sex parent, it's been a real learning experience for us, because we've had to educate ourselves. We've had to seek information, which I haven't minded doing. It's been fascinating, but it's not easy because there's not a lot of role models. I mean, I feel like we're kind of on the forefront of what a same-sex family looks like, and others have come before us to show us the way. And as River said, many of them are the families who are picking up the pieces of the heterosexual community and some of the decisions and choices they're making. So I'm really grateful that there's amazing gay couples. We have personal friends of ours that have adopted 2 boys, and they are amazing dads. The boys both came out of families that were broken and drugs were involved, and they're dealing with kids who are not necessarily easy, if you will, and they're embracing it, and they are the most loving, amazing family. So I feel like for me, that's God's design in some way. That I know that may not make sense, but I believe that we're all put here with purpose. And I look at Jeff and Tori, and I know that they're supposed to be Wesley and Quinn's dads. Like that's what they were put on this planet to do, among many other things. And there's just so much love that exists, and I wish that the majority of heterosexual people could see that. I think it's starting to change, but I mean, we have a group called Families Like Us that we go to, and it's all families with these amazing stories of all walks of life and colors, and it's beautiful. I think about the story of the coat of many colors, and it's always stuck with me because when I look at our world, it's our differences that make us so beautiful. And if we weren't different, if we were all the same, it'd be such a boring, mundane place to live. Like, I just think we should embrace these differences and realize that it's what makes us beautiful, and that the God I believe in put those differences here for a reason.
River, do you have anything to say to that?
I mean, I agree as far as the differences. I think differences is what makes the world go round, and that goes back to what I was saying before about we don't all have to agree. We just need, that's what America is about, though. We need to make an open society where all people have the option, all beliefs can flourish. I know you said not to get into politics, but that's hard for me. But I mean, when we have congressmen in our White House talking about, there was one a few weeks ago, Randy Weber from Texas. He was on the floor of Congress, and he was literally crying because our laws have gone away from what God's word is. But it's in our Constitution that we have freedom of religion, and that no religion should dictate our laws, and to believe it should is just extremely un-American. And I think it's important that no matter what you believe, yes, I'm an atheist. I really think a lot of times that, all the time, that religion doesn't make sense. But I'm not going to make a law that religion cannot be practiced and there should be no churches. I mean, so the same should be done. Just because you don't believe in LGBT issues, other people do. Let them have their option. Live and let live.
He brings up a point about...
Can I respond to that for just
Absolutely.
a second? Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mentioned earlier something about government, and I wanted to clarify that for a second. Government, and as it was set up here, government was set up not to favor one particular religion. It meant to be completely open to the idea or not. And throughout history, it has been evidently clear that government cannot bring you to salvation. Government, that's not their job. It never was their job. They're not good at it. So we would probably agree on government promoting a particular idea, because it's not going to work anyway. It's been proven over and over again. When the founding fathers came to this country, the reason why they put that in the Constitution was because the Europeans had screwed it up, excuse my language, screwed it up so badly that everybody moved away from it. They said, well, why is it that, I have to pay my, like in Germany, for example, and as far as I know, they're still doing it. Why do I have to give, 15 or 20 or whatever percentage it is to the church if I don't want to? I agree. God doesn't want your money if you don't want to give it to him. So I don't agree with those type of things. And government instituting guidelines where you have to follow because you're going to go to God this way, well, ain't gonna work anyway. That's not the route that Jesus talked about. It's a personal decision, and you make it regardless of the surroundings around you. When the apostles were proclaiming these doctrines, the government around them was completely opposed to it. They were trying to kill them. And did Paul say go out and overthrow the government? He never said that. Nobody else did either. That's not the route that God takes to have us come to a relationship with him, was through the government. It's never been that way. And when we tried to do it that way, as I said, we messed it up really, really bad. Just look at any of the European countries that tried to do that. They failed miserably at it. And I think that's what the Founding Fathers, when they came here, although I would disagree with you about one thing, River, a lot of the justice and the legal terms that we use in our courts come directly from the Bible. It's lying in wait for murder, intending to do it, that comes from the Bible. And manslaughter, for example, you killed somebody you didn't mean to, that's different. So those type of guidelines, I believe, do come from the Bible. So some of those things they saw and that it was good and they applied it. So that's something I would say in their favor, but again, saying that government's going to provide that route for anybody, they're not. So we're in agreement on that.
We're in agreement on that. So would you be opposed to hanging up a sign on a public building and that sign says, "In God We Trust"?
If it's been there for a while, I would say leave it. And I guess if California, for example, wanted to put on the Sacramento building that we don't think there is a God, okay, I would vote against it, but okay, if that's what you think. It's fine with me.
So,
It's only been on our money since the late 40s or early 50s.
50s, yeah.
right, 1956. I have heard people say, I have heard Christian preachers say that they place, and we were talking about the Constitution and religion, that they place the Bible over the Constitution.
In their lives, I do too.
You do too.
Absolutely. I put it over the Supreme Court too, because they're not supreme.
Okay, so you would place Bible scripture over
In my life,
in your
the way
life,
I'm going to live my life, I
Okay.
put the Bible first, above everything else.
but is it not the First Amendment to the Constitution that lets you do that?
Sure. But those guys that made that out, as I said, they were escaping from tyranny. They came
Okay.
here so that we can make choices.
Okay.
And they left those choices open to you.
Do you have a response to that, either one of you?
Well, I think that's the beauty of our country, and I think it's only come really to my understanding, as sad as this is. I don't think I understood it in history class in high school. I've understood it when it's affected my life personally, that what a beautiful country we live in, where there is a separation of church and state. There's supposed to be, and that our founding fathers were smart enough. God love them. I've stood in Washington, D.C. and read those monuments and the quotes, and I'm like, how on earth could they have known back then that this is where we would be? I stood there prior to the same-sex ruling going, this applies today. Like, it's amazing how much forethought the forefathers had. And I'm so grateful that we live in a country like that. What I don't like is it's happening today. There's religious freedom acts being passed. I grew up in Indiana. Our vice president passed a religious freedom bill in Indiana, making it okay to discriminate against people like me because of your religion. Well, that is in complete opposition of what our Constitution says. So I don't think that that's okay. That is not okay by me. It's not fair. And if you are a River in a small town in Kentucky, what option do you have, right? And one of the things you said, Kelly, that I want to go back to real quick is when we were talking about families and giving kids choices. I think about my upbringing, and if your parents are preaching to you and putting this information in your head, there weren't options. I didn't have choices, if you will, till I was much older. So the support comes and the openness comes if it can come at a young age, and an awareness at a young age of not everybody believes this. Our children will flourish in a different way. So much of that oppression happens and it takes so long to unwind, and there are not choices. You're sent to camp to become not gay, right?
Which doesn't work.
Which doesn't work. My parents went to the Focus on the Family, prevention of homosexuality, instead of coming with me to a pflag meeting and actually talking about what was going on. How do we prevent this from happening to save her soul, rather than talking about it? So that oppression is what's creating so much of the problem. And I will also say I believe totally in exposure to difference and getting out of an environment, because I think about my little town in Seymour, Indiana, and what I saw versus the bigger picture of our United States and how colorful and diverse we are. Completely changed my world when I went an hour away to a college that was in a big city in Indianapolis and went, oh, Jewish, Buddhist, Muslim. Had no idea till I was 18 years old. So it makes a huge impact on children, and we can do ourselves such a justice to educate our kids about that, not just about what we believe if it's a certain way.
There's a thing that you touched on, Angie, and I want to bring this to you as well, Kelly and River, and that was, you talked about when Vice President Pence was the governor of Indiana, and he initiated that religious freedom, I think they called it the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Mm-hmm. And it had to do with what we might put under this kind of generic category of the florist and the bakers getting upset because baking a cake for a gay wedding upsets their Christian belief, or making flower arrangements for a gay wedding upsets their Christian beliefs. And and that is kind of one of those things that kind of keeps nagging us, even though we've agreed that people of the same sex can get married. We've got a few florists, bakers, photographers, private wedding chapels, whatever, getting upset. So let me hand that to you if you want to talk about that.
Okay. I would take a different avenue. Why are you trying to dictate what that business has to do? If they don't want to, why is it that you can't just go to a different one? There's lots of florists around now. If you had a small town, example, small town, one florist in town, and everything was all hundreds of miles away, maybe you have a point, but I don't think that exists.
Absolutely exists, and that's why it's unfair.
Okay. Well,
if you go to a rural town in Wyoming and try to get married and go to the baker in town and they say, we're not going to bake the cake for you, what are your options? So, and why should I have to drive 100 miles to have a cake baked when my brother and his wife can walk in the bakery and have a cake baked for them? I'm all about choice, but that does exist. And I think that's where the problem lies, is no situation. They're completely different situations if you're in an urban million people metropolis with lots of options versus what you just described.
well, but that's, Angie, you just brought up a hypothetical, and I don't foresee that. First of all,
But it's happening today, Kelly. It's happening where we grew up. It's happening.
It happened in my state with Kim Davis not issuing marriage licenses. And they said, why can't you just go to the other county? Well, a lot of people don't have access to that.
Transportation,
Right.
yeah.
And even if they do, it's the principle of it. A straight couple doesn't have to go to the other county.
Well, in particular instance you're mentioning, River, for Kim Davis, I think she should have quit.
Right.
Because if the ordinances are that these people can get married and you're working for the city, then I agree with her position, okay? I'm not saying that she should change her position. I'm just saying if your position ends up in contradiction with what you're supposed to do, then you should quit.
I agree with that.
I agree with that too.
Because I'm just saying that that's what the job that she has, which changed. We both know that changed, right? When she came into the job, it wasn't that way. But after she had been there for a while, it was. So now she has a decision that she has to make, and she's going against what the law of the land is, right? Her particular convictions are hers, and she gets to make that choice for herself. But I don't believe she gets to make, in the position that she was in, gets to make the choice for others. And I don't think the Bible teaches that you make choice for others.
So this has been my question.
I'll let you finish that up, then I got to cut in, and we're sort of getting to the end of our time schedule here.
Perfect.
So,
It's just an inquiry, because I've thought about it a lot with the Religious Freedom Act. I walk into restaurants every day that have a sign that says, we refuse the right to serve anyone. Like, you get to decide, right? Those signs are everywhere. What does that mean? I mean, isn't that like you can discriminate against whoever walks in here? And where did those signs come from? Like, they're everywhere. And yet it's just an open question. I walk into a restaurant in Long Beach and I see that sign and I'm like, does that mean as a business owner, if you're not okay with me, you can kick me out? That's what the sign means to me.
Even in Long Beach. Well,
Yeah.
Well, and
If someone is homeless, if someone doesn't have their shoes on, right? Like, I mean, as a business owner, I mean, where's the line? And as the religious freedom thing happened, I was like, well, what do those signs mean then? Are we already discriminating against people? Who gets to decide?
Are we indeed? Who does get to decide?
Well, when it comes to eating, I don't think there's a point behind it. Everybody eats. Whereas the florist or the person that's baking a cake that's supposed to be a celebration of what it is you're doing, I don't think they should be forced into doing something like that, because there is religious freedom. That means there's freedom for the person who holds certain views to be able to participate in those views. And I think that Constitution protects us as religious people as well. Now, if they want to do it, I'm religion, I hate religion, but people that have a relationship with God, and God says this isn't something that I want you participating in, why are they forced to participate in it?
But what's to
If that's
stop someone from serving me a meal then?
If it's a public
It's
service.
a
Well,
food. You're eating. That's
Based
not
upon
that's not a
based upon
thing.
this discussion, we could take this on for a while.
Yeah, but let me just-
we
let me
are
just-
at the
It's
end
a
of our
fine
time
line.
frame.
I
Yeah,
think.
let me
It's
just
a
make
very
the-
slippery slope. If you discriminate against someone in a particular category, then you open the door for discrimination in many other ways, and I think that's where it gets
Well, what I would
really,
ask
really slippery.
what I would ask the restaurant is, what's your reason for not serving this person?
Well, there is-
And what's the reason behind it? Don't think they get to eat?
well, there are more of those
That's
questions.
that's not something that is the same analogy as with the flour maker or the cake baker. That's a different analogy,
Okay.
because everybody gets to eat, right?
Everybody gets to eat.
And nobody's saying that you can't, right?
All right.
If the restaurant would refuse to serve somebody because whatever, then that's legislated against. I think
Yeah.
that's a different aspect. Is all I'm saying. I think it's a
And with
different-
that, I'm going to have to bring this portion of it to a close.
I'm going to have question and answers.
And we will have questions and answers. And I think we take a little break. Is that correct? So we'll take a little break, and we'll come back with questions, and we will do our best to answer those questions. Thank you very much.